Well, thank you, Nikki, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jadine Jones, and I am from the Sacramento County Office of Education, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the California Physical Fitness, or PFT as we call it, webinar from the California Department of Education. Before we begin our session, we want to address a few housekeeping items. First, all participants are muted. Therefore, in order to submit your questions during the presentation, you may use the Q&A feature. This is not the same as the chat feature. For this webinar, we will only be using the Q&A feature. Second, a copy of today's note-taking guide was sent to you via email. If you haven't received it or need access to it again, the URL has been placed in the chat box. Clicking on the URL will take you to a folder where you can download the guide or make a copy into your own Google Drive. There is no edit access from the link that we shared with you. You will have to make your own copy first. So, what is on our agenda for today? We will be addressing general information about the PFT, reviewing last year's changes, since the administration this year will be the same as last year. And at the end, we will respond to questions about this presentation. Now, let's start with an overview of some general PFT information. Start by answering the question, what is the PFT? The PFT is the statewide physical performance testing program that began in 1976 and was established in 1995 as part of the California Assessment of Academics Act. The PFT is a comprehensive, health-related physical fitness battery of tests for students in California. The State Board of Education designated the FitnessGram as the PFT for students in California public schools. In the past, there have been 6 components of the PFT test that students were to perform. However, due to changes made by the California Department of Education, you will only administer 5 FitnessGram test areas, which provides information that can be used to assess health-related fitness levels. California will use the following FitnessGram fitness areas: aerobic capacity, abdominal strength and endurance, trunk extensor strength and flexibility, upper body strength and endurance, and flexibility. Who takes the PFT? By law, all LEAs in California are required to administer the PFT annually, February 1st through May 31st, to public school students in grades 5, 7, and 9, unless the LEA has a State Board of Education, an SBE, waiver to administer the PFT outside the designated window. These waivers are required to be approved before the November SBE meeting and prior to testing. Students are required to take the PFT whether or not they are enrolled in a physical education class or participate in a block schedule. Include students enrolled in elementary school districts, high school districts, unified school districts, county offices of education, charter schools that are independent for assessment purposes, i.e., independent charter schools. LEAs must also test all their students enrolled in alternate programs, including but not limited to continuation schools, independent study, community day schools, county community schools, and non-public schools. Students with disabilities. Students with special needs are given the PFT as well, but with a few differences. First, students are to be given as much of the test as their condition will permit. I'm going to repeat that because it is an important point. Students are to be given as much of the test as their condition will permit. Next, the FitnessGram has 2 or 3 test options for most of the fitness areas of the test, which allows students with special needs a wider range of opportunity to complete each fitness area in a way that works for them. It is important to remember that any and all decisions about what parts of the PFT students can take or what accommodations they should have is a local decision. The Individualized Education Program, or IEP, that is signed by a parent, legal guardian, or adult student, and the IEP team, is the legal document that determines accommodations for this assessment. The CDE cannot answer questions about which parts of the test the student should take. California schools have returned to in-person instruction and PE classes have resumed. LEAs will once again be required to administer the FitnessGram. The changes mentioned below are the same as last year. There are no new changes to the PFT administration for 2022-2023. All students in grades 5, 7, and 9 will continue to be tested on physical fitness using the FitnessGram. Students should receive their raw scores at the time of testing and have their participation recorded. Again, for students with a physical disability or who are unable to take all of the physical performance test shall be given as much of the test as their condition will permit. As a reminder, that information related to calculating a student's body mass index, or BMI, will not be did. This includes height, weight, gender, and age. Reporting purposes, only participation information will be collected and reported on the School Accountability Report Card, also known as the SARC. There will be no submission of student-level data to the secure PFT portal. Instead, LEAs will now be required to submit participation results for each of the 5 assessed areas. PFT window. As always, the PFT administration window opens on February 1st and ends on May 31st. This means that you can start administering the PFT to students unless you have a waiver from the State Board of Education to administer before the window. Without a State Board waiver, the PFT cannot be administered to students before or after the window. With other assessments, there are many resources made available to help you through the PFT administration process. Let's review some of the available PFT resources. First, we will discuss resources to help your students' families. The Parent Guide to Understanding is an excellent resource that answers the who, what, when, why, and how of the PFT in parent-friendly language, focusing on the facts that parents want to know. Additionally, we have the PFT fact sheet, which answers the who, what, when, why, and how of the PFT for educators. This has more technical information and detail than the parent version. And we haven't forgotten about the resources for PFT coordinators, alternate coordinators, or PE teachers tasked with administering the PFT. These resource links can also be found in your note-taking guide and include the PFT Coordinator Manual, which gives PFT coordinators and alternate coordinators detailed information on all aspects of the PFT and their responsibilities. The Reference Guide, which is geared more towards educators who will be administering the PFT and gives details about each test option, along with administration tips and tricks. And the equipment list, which shows what equipment is needed to administer each of the test options.
Okay, Laura asked, for the participation rate, do we count only those with active enrollment during the testing window? Do we count those who ended up transferring in, transferring out? Like, how does all that work? And here's how we're going to calculate participation. It's the number of students who participated in that FitnessGram component, right? So let's say aerobic capacity or flexibility or whatever. And then you divide that by the number of students enrolled in that grade level at the time of testing. And then, of course, we're going to multiply that by 100 to get our participation rate, which is rounded to the nearest 10th. Beyond that, that is how we're going to calculate participation. So you're going to determine locally what is the time of testing and what students are going to be in that denominator for that. And I had a similar question come in about, do you exclude students who were unable to complete the test? And no, it's the number of students enrolled in the grade at the time of testing for your denominator and the number of students who participated for that numerator. So thank you, Laura, for that question. Janine asked, what constitutes participation? If a student attempts a curl up but can't do one, does that still count towards participation? So participation is a local decision. You get to determine what constitutes participation for your LEA. Jane was asking, we assess the FitnessGram, the 5 areas, but we don't use the FitnessGram calculation, right? We just give the students their raw scores. And I'm going to read to you from Ed Code, so we have this exact. Per Ed Code 60800. Pupils shall be provided their individual results after completing the physical performance testing. The test result may be provided orally or in writing, and how the LEA manages or reports student scores to students and families is a local decision, right? So you give the students their raw scores. You ran an 8-minute, 12-second mile. You did 2 push-ups. In whatever way locally you determine you're going to do that. And then obviously you'll submit your participation to the SARC. And that is what is required in that area. Great question. Lisa was asking about the use of a program. They used a specific FitnessGram program last year to record their results. Do we still need to use the program? Use of an outside program is absolutely a local decision. It is not required. All that's required, like I said, is that you're reporting the scores to the students, those raw scores, and you're submitting participation to the SARC. If you want to use something above and beyond that, that's a local decision, that's fine, but it is not required. So then just to clarify for Lauren that the testing window is February 1st through May 31st. That is correct. Someone asked, if a student's repeated a grade and took the PFT last year, do they need to take it again this year? For example, if they were in 7th grade last year and they're in 7th grade again this year. And yes, that is correct. Students repeating grades 5, 7, or 9 are required to retake the PFT. We had a question about a virtual charter school. A few of the students don't have access to attend in-person PFT administration. Are we able to test remotely? And the answer is no, the PFT was not developed to test remotely. So each LEA will have to figure out how to test your students in person. Someone else is asking for students, for students who are exempt during the pandemic, how do we reflect that on their transcript? Any suggestions? And that really comes down to why they were exempt. I would encourage you for that very specific situation to reach out to the CDE and kind of troubleshoot that one offline. They are pft@cde.ca.gov. Someone else was asking to make sure that aerobic capacity is part of the 5 fitness areas that will be assessed. And that is correct. So aerobic capacity is one of the 5. And under aerobic capacity, you can do the 20-meter pacer. Pacer stands for Progressive Aerobic Cardiovascular Endurance Run. You can do the 1-mile run or the 1-mile walk. The next section is abdominal strength and endurance. Under that is the curl up. Then you have the trunk extensor strength and flexibility section. Under that is the trunk lift. Then you have the upper body strength and endurance section. Under that is the push-up, the modified pull-up, or the flexed arm hang. And then under that is flexibility. And for flexibility, you have either the back saver sit and reach or the shoulder stretch. Someone asked, can parents opt their children out of the PFT? And the answer is no, they cannot. There's no official opt-out for the PFT. Another one about digital or remote schools. And there are no provisions within the law or the PFT manual that allows LEAs to administer the PFT virtually. It must be completed by the student in person. All California public schools in grades 5, 7, and 9 are required to take the PFT, whether the students are or are not enrolled in a physical education class or in a block schedule. So someone asked, is reporting simple participation likely to change going forward, or will there be a point in time when we go back to calculating the healthy fitness zones? And at this point, we don't know. There's a report that's going to be presented to the legislation. And until that happens and until decisions are made, we're chugging along with this method of administering the PFT and reporting participation to the SARC. Marcella asked, how do we submit participation to the SARC? That's a great question that we get quite often. You're going to want to work with the individual at your school or district that's responsible for submitting the SARC. And if they have questions, or if that is you and you don't know what you're doing and you have questions, there's a SARC team available to help you. Their email is sarc, S-A-R-C, @cde.ca.gov. If a student has a 504, you may need to modify the test according to their Section 504 plan or IEP, but you will still administer as much of the test as permitted for that student. Someone else is asking about, do we record VO2 max? Again, that is a local decision. I know the calculation for VO2 max requires height and weight, I believe. So all that is required of you by the state, again, is to give the student their raw score. You ran an 8-minute, 12-second mile, or you did 2 push-ups, and record participation. If you decide to go above and beyond and collect additional data and calculate all of that, that is a local decision. Is the parent guide also available in Spanish? Yes, I believe it is. The resources page of pftdata.org should have all of the most recent resources, including translations. If that's not there, shoot us an email at pft@scoe.net and we will get that taken care of. Is there an Excel template for teachers to record students' participation? There's not an Excel spreadsheet. There's a document that provides instructions on how you can calculate PFT participation. We find that locally people collect, just different kinds of data in an Excel sheet. So there's not one central, but you can make one that follows along with all of the fields you would need to collect. Do we do the math for participation results? What numbers do we submit? And what do we do with the raw scores? So raw scores, again, go to students and families. and in whatever way you guys are deciding locally to send that information or provide it verbally. For the participation, yes, there's a resource that helps you calculate participation for the PFT. That's linked in the note-taking guide. And you're doing that math, you're calculating participation, and you are submitting the participation rate per grade, per fitness area to the SARC.
Nikki, this is Stephanie. There's a lot of questions about Matrix 2. We need to actually go back, and those documents were updated, but somehow the Matrix 2 was overlooked. It is not available. The whole point of the study for the PFT was to make it more accessible and equitable. And the Matrix 2 really didn't provide much more than accommodations for IEPs, such as extra time, but it didn't give any accommodations for students who were, maybe in a wheelchair or had cerebral palsy or any of those kinds of disabilities. So the Matrix 2 is not available. And the only thing that you can do for your students is go off of what is on their IEP or 504.
Yeah, so it's do 10th graders who, if they didn't test last year, do they have to take it this year? And the answer is no. It's only for students, well, you report for students in grades 5, 7, and 9. So we're not going to do any of the reporting for 10th graders.
As far as equipment, the CDE does not support or endorse any vendor. We're not affiliated with anybody in that way. So you'll just have to go on to Google and do a little search for any kind of equipment. As far as submitting the data, you have to submit it by February 1st of the following school year. And it's participation only.
Thank you. I got a very similar question. Are we submitting PFT student data from last year? So the SARC that you're doing now, right, will include PFT data from the last administration cycle, February 1st through May 31st of 22 goes into the SARC that you're doing now. And then when your window opens February 1st through May 31st, 23, you'll submit that participation data in the next SARC and so on and so forth. So it is just about a year behind. And then I have another question. Why are we required to create or to designate a coordinator when we no longer use that platform? And that's because we need to know who to talk to. If we have updates to send you, if we need to invite you to a webinar, we need to have a coordinator designated in order to do that. So keeping LEAs current with their coordinator designation is a thing that we need on our side to be able to communicate with you. So that is why the coordinator designation is still required every year.
And to piggyback on that, Nikki, I've had at least 10 emails asking me for their scores because the person that administered the PFT is no longer at the school, and they're thinking that I have, the scores available. And I'm like, no, you have to go back to the person who actually administered the test, for the scores.
Yes. And then Dawn, I think I'm going to try to put you on the spot if possible to talk about the possible exemptions, because I know you've given this answer in the past, or maybe Stephanie, you know it if Dawn doesn't. So we have someone asking about if we're not collecting BMI, what about that exemption for passing the FitnessGram that exempts from the second year of PE? Or, is that legislation still valid?
So the education code is very clear in that the exemptions are available. They are specific to graduation requirements. If you are interested in those exemptions, you should work with your district. There is nothing that's stopping you from providing all the exemptions. We are not collecting that information. So if you are going to provide an exemption based on performance in the PFT and using all of the parts of the FitnessGram, that is a local decision. It is not information that is being collected by the department.
And then I got another one. What is the date to submit the SARC? And it's in our FAQs, it says that each school year, Schools or LEAs must prepare and make available their new SARCs no later than February 1st. But I also know that, there's a SARC template and all of that. So I would just encourage you to reach out to whoever it is that does the SARC at your LEA. They will absolutely be able to tell you what the deadlines are and when they need that data from you. And if that's you and you have questions, I would encourage you to reach out to sarc@cde.ca.gov. Someone is saying there's an issue with what's showing up on their SARC. Again, I would encourage you to reach out to sarc@cde. They're the ones that run the whole SARC template and can troubleshoot any of those issues for you. We don't have any access to the SARC template. Stacy's asking, students cannot be opted out of the PFT, correct? That is correct. There's no official opt-out mechanism for the PFT. Robin's asking, so based on what was just stated about participation and the date tested, should we pull attendance on the day that the test is given? Our teachers give it on different days, so the denominator is generally taken at the end of the testing window in May. That is absolutely going to be a local decision. We've given guidance on what the denominator should be, right? And that is the number of students enrolled on test day. How you make that happen on your end is absolutely up to you guys. What are the ramifications for not meeting the 95% participation rate? I don't believe there is.
There is not a 95% participation requirement for PFT.
So again, we've got a duplicate question. If a 10th grade student didn't participate last year, do they need to make it up this year? No, they do not. To clarify, we do not record weight, height, gender, or age. Again, local decision. It is not required of you to submit any of that data to us at the PFT. We're not collecting any of your data short of your coordinator. And that data is not required to calculate participation for the SARC. So it is not required for you to collect it. If you do decide to go above and beyond and collect it, that is a local decision and one you should make, at your school or district level with input from all the powers that be before you start collecting that data. To verify, are we required to send results to parents? That is not required. What is required is that you give the students their scores, but you can choose to give the results to students or families in writing if you would like, but so long as I believe you give them verbally to the students, you've met Ed Code. Will we get sent the required CDs or do we need to request them? I'm assuming you're talking about like the beeping, pacing CDs, and that is something you will need to order if that is what you'll be using. That's not just automatically sent. Another opt-out one. Nope, parents cannot opt their students out. There's no official opt-out mechanism. Someone's asking again for clarification. Did you say we only need to submit participation? We don't have to submit all the data. That is correct. That secure district portal that you used to access through pftdata.org will not open. We will not be collecting any of your data through that portal. What we will be collecting is just that participation rate, and that is done through the SARC. There won't be a different test for this. What are we in? We're in 22-23. We're doing the same thing we did last year with just those 5 areas of the fitnessgram. We do not know what is coming in the future until that report goes to the legislature and they make some decisions. Rebecca's asking, when we submit participation to the SARC, do we have to report the percentage of students who participated and whether or not they passed or failed? Nope, just the percentage that participated per grade, per fitness area. So your 5th graders that participated in aerobic capacity, your 7th graders, like what percent participated in aerobic capacity, your 9th graders, and so on and so forth. Just the percent participation.
Nikki, with regards to the future, people should assume, based on the current year, that the following years will look much like this year until they don't. So for planning purposes, if you're already forward thinking to the spring of 2024, you should plan as if it's going to be just like 2023 until we tell you it's not going to be. I know that sounds really bureaucratic and not very helpful, but really that's what we have for you right now. Until the legislature receives the report from the superintendent and acts upon the report, and then does whatever the legislature is going to do, this is going to be the standard operating procedures as we move forward.
Okay, Linda asked, is there a passing score per component or overall? And someone else asked, where's the poster where kids can determine their own passing or failing? And what you guys are talking about are the healthy fitness zones. And again, we've gotten away from that because those were gendered, just male and female. And there is no like non-binary version of the healthy fitness zones, which is why we're calculating participation. If you decide to direct students to the male and or female healthy fitness zones, that is a local decision. I don't remember I think, Stephanie, they might still be up on the CDE website. If you're dying to go digging for them, you might still be able to find them, but they are, I believe, not on the pftdata.org site because we're just doing participation. So that's a local decision if you decide to go looking for them or directing your students to them. Nicole's asking who can administer the PFT. And I have that answer too. The PFT shall be administered and scored by employees of the LEA. That's from California Code of Regulations, Title V, Section 1043. For purposes of the PFT, students may not administer the tests to each other, and parents or guardians may not administer or help with the administration of the PFT to students. And then really quick, I'm going to pop a link in the chat for everyone. It links to our FAQ page. It's been recently updated. We're very excited about it. But a lot of the answers to your questions can be found here. So if you're ever looking for a great place to go that has lots of answers for you, I just put the link in the chat to our help center. Okay, Ken's asking, so 5 events or fitness areas within the PFT means 5 participation reports. Or do you do 1 participation percentage for all 5 events? You are actually going to do 1 participation for each of the 5 events for each of the grades. So if I've done that math correctly, that's 15, right? The 5 for grade 7, the 5 for grade 9, and the 5 for grade 5. What website do we use to order equipment? I don't know that there's just one website. There's an equipment list in our resources on pftdata.org. But I don't know that we have any vendors or recommendations for how to order that equipment. Dawn, I'm going to throw this question to you. I'm guessing the answer is local decision, but maybe you can be very official about it. If a parent writes to excuse their child from participating, do you honor that request or not because there's no official opt-out?
So you are correct. That is a local decision. There is no, the education code does not have a provision for opting a child out of physical fitness testing. Unlike other state assessments, there are opt-outs. There is not one for PFT. There has not been one for PFT since the early 90s. So it is a local decision of how the principal or superintendent or leadership will handle a parental request.
Paul's asking, do we still submit the PFT sample student data collection form with their scores or participation only? If you choose to use the sample student data collection forms, that's awesome, but that is a local decision. I would talk to whoever it is that collects or is collecting this participation data for the SARC and ask them how they want to get your numerator, your denominator, your calculation. They are going to be the ones in charge of collecting that data, so they might have a mechanism that they want to use. So I would just check with them. I'm seeing a lot of duplicate questions, so I'll try to hit them again real fast as we move through. 10th graders who didn't test last year do not have to take it because they're not in grade 5, 7, or 9. Dawn or Stephanie, I'm going to throw a couple of them your way. We have one asking that if a student has a doctor's note that's exempting them from the PFT, would they count in the percentage of non-participants?
So all students enrolled at the time of testing, whether or not they participated, must be included in the participation rate. Yeah.
So the only place to record participation percent is in the SARC. That is the only place we are collecting it. If you locally have other things that you're going to do with this data, that's great, but that is a local decision. All we require is the participation in the SARC. Where and how do we house the PFTU student results? Are they included in the student's CUME file?
Participation, because it is a result, air quote, participation is to be recorded in the student's CUME folder. That is part of the ongoing regulations as well as what's in the law. So that has not changed. It is an ongoing, that's not new.
When a teacher submit their data, do they need to submit the raw scores or do they just show participation in the fitness area test? Again, that's up to you guys and what you want to collect. If all you want to collect is the participation that you're going to send off to the SARC, then that's all your teachers need to send to you. If you guys are going to collect raw scores as well as participation, that's great. You just let your people know what they need to submit to you. But we are only collecting participation. Lots of questions about participation rate. And again, there is no magic 95% participation rate like there is for the CASP. The expectation is that, you know, all students in grades 5, 7, and 9 are tested, and you will do your best, you know, to get to as close to that number as possible, knowing that, you know, you will have some kids that can't take all of the tests due to IEPs or things like that. But there's no magic number, like, because there's no opt-out like there is for the CASP. How does a district determine if a 9th grader has passed the FitnessGram to be considered exempt? We said, Dawn answered that one before. Those avenues are still open. Those things are still out there, but we are only collecting participation data. So that's a local decision on your end. Dawn or Stephanie, we're getting quite a few questions about notifying parents about taking the PFT. And I will say we do have a handy dandy letter template, but I'll let CDE answer the requirement piece of that side.
It's not specific. It just says this parents shall be notified. I will say that from my experiences that districts have, as part of its annual back to school paper shuffle, provided that notification as part of that package, that they will be doing testing in the spring. But there is nothing in regulations or law that specifies how a parent is to be notified. It's just to be notified.
When teachers submit their data to the coordinator, do they need to submit the raw scores? Up to you. If you want the raw scores submitted, let your people know, and then that's what you can collect. If you just want participation data collected, then that's all that they need to submit to you. But remember that the students need to be told their scores orally or verbally. Those are the same thing. Let's try that again. Orally or in writing, up to you. How you do that. So long as that's happening on the teacher side, if all you want to collect is participation data, you're good to go. If you have a different process in mind, then you can facilitate that. That is a local decision. Is there an exemption code? No, there are no exemption codes for PFT. There's some questions about what IEP teams can or cannot include in the IEP, and that is not something that we can answer. Those determinations are made, again, locally by that IEP team. Okay, someone's asking to clarify, we need the data from last year. So the SARC that is happening, I'm going to say now-ish, will include PFT data from the February 1 to May 31st in 2022 administration. So whether that data has already been passed along to your SARC person or not, you will need to find out. But the data for the window that opens next week on February 1st, that data won't be reported until the following SARC in February of 24. A couple more questions about having issues with the SARC template. Again, I would encourage you to reach out to sarc@cde.ca.gov. That is not something we have access to or can help troubleshoot. Dawn, someone's asking if you can explain the waiver part again.
I'm sorry, there are no waivers.
Not the opt-out, sorry, but like the if they decide to collect additional data and the student.
The exemptions.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry.
Okay. It's nearly Friday, right? Exemptions. The exemptions are all in education code. They're exemptions from physical education as part of graduation requirements. They are all honored and all there. The Department of Education is no longer requiring districts or LEAs to collect all the information necessary to provide all of the exemptions. As such, if you want to honor a specific exemption, specifically the one that has to deal with the fitnessgram, then there is information you will need to collect. You are not required by the department to collect that. It is a local decision to, one, collect that information, and two, to use it for the exemption, but it is a local decision.
Can scores be whole numbers only? I'm assuming you're referring to the participation that you submit to the SARC. That will be rounded to the nearest 10th. I'm getting lots of questions about specific, like how to administer or specific test options. For those, I'm going to refer you, we have a couple resources on our resources page of pftdata.org. There's the coordinator manual, which is a great high-level overview for coordinators. And there's the PFT reference guide, which is designed to assist staff in becoming familiar with the PFT. So if you have questions about specific tests or administration, things like that, I would refer you there. That is not something we're going to cover in this webinar. Okay, another clarification. The SARC that submitted on February of 2023, now-ish, will have the results from the 21-22 SARC. That is correct. And then next year's SARC will have this year's PFT results and so on and so forth, because the PFT goes February through May, gives you time to calculate participation, and then we wait for that SARC to open before we can submit that data. Lots of questions about this participation rate percentage. So again, there's no magic 95% number like there is for CASP because we don't have an opt-out on the PFT. And that's all the original. I'm not seeing any new questions that we haven't already covered.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nikki. And thank you everyone for your submission of questions. And thank you to Nikki and Dawn and Stephanie from the CDE. That brings us to the end of our presentation today. Thank you for joining us. We hope the information shared today was valuable and timely. Our contact information has been included in the note-taking guide and should any questions arise. And with that, thank you